Hello, good morning. Patrick Peace here. Continuing on with my review of Sam Harris's The End of Faith. I finished chapter 2 and I took some notes. A lot of what Sam writes about are um, faith that are not related to Christianity. So I'm going to leave those because, first of all, I agree with a lot of what he says about these. Let's use the example of India and Pakistan fighting each other. And he says that certain beliefs are intrinsically dangerous. And he makes points about that. And he goes through a lot of different examples. And a lot of them I agree with. He has a very, I guess eloquent would be a word to say, of how he speaks about life. He calls life a vast spectacle of loss and the sobering reality of death. Things like that he mentions, and they really set you back and force you to think things through. Something he said, bad ideas, however sacred, cannot survive the company of good ones. And this is what I believe that Sam Harris misses, is that the teachings of Christ of loving one another, loving your neighbor as yourself, and the radical idea of loving your enemies has survived the test of time. This has this is one of the good ideas. This has survived because it's in the company of good ideas. If we didn't have that teaching, would somebody else just come along and, well, somebody might have come along through history and come up with ones that are similar, and you can see how examples they give for the golden rule are found in other religions, and usually they're much more convoluted and not as succinct as the one that Christ taught. That's fine, but there's so many other principles that Christ taught which have survived the test of time and are beneficial to humanity, which he ignores, right? But whenever he does bring up Christ, and this is interesting, whenever he brings up Christ, he slides him in the most malicious way possible. And I'll give you one other example. I gave an example in the first video, and now another one. He said, well, it could be like this or it could be like that, but what if this person, and he's referring to Christ, of course, was actually born, instead of being born in a virgin, born of sin and died like, and I'm not going to repeat what he said because it's too harsh for me personally, and I wouldn't want to offend myself or anybody else. But he throws it in there, and he kind of says, well, you know, you've got all these bad results of aberrant religions or aberrant ideologies, and then, by the way, what if this guy is not born of a virgin or something? Like his I wouldn't call it straw man, but he presents Christ is as belittling a light as possible at every opportunity, and that is what causes it to fail so far for the first two chapters for me. Chapter 1, he comes out with guns blazing. He's got amazing thought experiments to do that really will force you to say, hey, is my religion valuable, or is it isn't, or is it not? And for that reason, I'm very thankful that he forces the reader to think. He says, beliefs are principles of actions. Beliefs must be coherent. He's got a lot of really excellent points. Logical, on point, valuable to consider, and to consider in the light. He has a great way of putting it in a broad perspective. He's able to put your mind in a state where you're thinking of the totality of history, and not only the totality of history, but the totality of the cosmos. And he reminds you, saying, hey, are your beliefs and values contributing to the advancement of humanity, or are they not? If they're not, a lot of times they're very dangerous. Sometimes they could be innocuous and inconsequential, of course, but he reminds the reader to get rid of what is superfluous and stick with what actually is real. So for that, I'm very thankful. I'm going to move on to chapter 3, but a crazy thing that I'd like to mention in reviewing this chapter, one of the notes that I didn't mention from chapter 1 that I had written down, I wrote down word for word as if I was speaking to Sam Harris, and I said, Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, was what I wrote, because he has a tendency to do that. I watched a podcast the other night with Matthew McConaughey, a Christian man, and he said the exact same phrase. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. People have seen and recognized the futility of a lot of religious belief, thought, and actions. We get that. We know that. We're a progressive society. We're moving forward. We're accepting people that had been persecuted in the past because of specific characteristics that we felt Christians, speaking as a we to Christians, that didn't match up. And this is fading away now. There's more inclusivity. There's more, okay, this is going to benefit us, and this is going to work within the framework of love one another. So people are waking up to that and say, oh, that's not really loving my neighbor, is it? If I cherish that particular belief, jettison that. It probably found it in Leviticus or Deuteronomy. Jettison it if it doesn't work for you. The intention of the law was for the benefit of the people. If it's no longer benefiting the people, and sometimes in certain circumstances it still benefits the people, right? If it doesn't, the intention is what's important. And Christ taught us that, right? Where he obliterated the Sabbath when it didn't have the correct intention. He said if you have to pull somebody out of a pit on a Sunday or a Saturday, I should say, you're going to do it, aren't you? If you can help somebody instead of hurting them, you're going to do it, aren't you? And this is a reminder to us today that our theology should stay current with the overriding principles of loving our neighbor as ourselves, loving one another, encouraging people. It's not hard to see what sin is when it causes death and mayhem and chaos. We know that's sinful, and he gives stark examples in the book about, people that give up their lives just for the sake of taking a whole bunch of other people's lives. That's straightforward and clear, right? We don't even have to go back to the 10 Commandments of don't kill, right? Don't kill, don't steal, don't rip people off. We know what the summary of the law is. Even when they asked Christ, what's the law? He didn't rhyme off the 10 Commandments. He gave a summary of the intention of the law. He said, well, you know the law. Don't kill, don't steal, don't cheat, don't rip off people. And so he summarized it, but it can be summarized even shorter into two, right? Love God, love your neighbor. And so those two are continuing on through history, and Christ said he's going to build his church. The gates of hell won't prevail against it. Well, he was right, wasn't he? I mean, he knew how history was going to turn out, and the gospel is still the gospel today. It's still good news for people. It's good news in that they can be reconciled to God the Father in heaven, that there is a God in heaven. If Christ didn't come and tell us that there was a God in heaven, we'd be in a different world right now. But I'm moving forward. I want to keep this short as possible. That's chapter 2, and really good for forcing your mind to think in a way that's logical, and in a way that either validates or condemns your own faith. It's a questioning of your faith, saying, does your faith stand up to this standard? Does your faith contribute to the benefit of humanity, or does it detract from humanity? And you only have to look at most churches today are like community centers. I mean, the big ones, the mega churches, for example, they got all kinds of community programs that help the community, help for addictions, help for looking after children that don't have anywhere to go, help for feeding the poor, and redistributing resources, all kinds of community-oriented things. And I'm speaking specifically about the Christian churches and the work that they do, but there's other churches of other faiths as well that contribute to society. So it's a very dark image that Sam Harris gives, because he's picking out the harshest examples. But again, I would repeat what Matthew McConaughey said: don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's a good message. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Have a great day.